Hi, welcome to the Bytes Virtual Summit. I'm Al Cumberworth, your host. I'm the Microsoft Unified Communications Specialist here at Bytes. I've been working with Microsoft for the past 12 years on Microsoft Voice deployments, going back from OCS R2 days right through to direct routing and Teams and Microsoft Voice in various different architectures and topologies that you can have it. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a bit more of a deep dive around the different options that you have when it comes to deploying Microsoft Voice and replacing traditional PBXs. I'm joined today by Paul Davidson, who's the Head of Digital Transformation at Teleware 365, and Jason Foxton, who is the Microsoft Pre-Sales Lead at Teleware 365. Hi, gents. Hope you're both well. Thanks for joining today.
Afternoon, Al. Thank you.
Afternoon.
So, throughout the last 18 months, the landscape has changed a lot for organizations, for employees, and how they communicate and collaborate together effectively. As we know, the big red panic button got hit all those many months ago, and now people are starting to look at how to replace their PBXs with Microsoft and Teams. So there's a lot you have to take into consideration depending on number of locations you have, looking at things like persona mapping, looking at VC, and looking at how we get the best out of hybrid working. And a lot of the time, there's things to consider like the change management, the end user training and adoption, and how you effectively communicate that out to the organization and make sure that you're empowering each and every one of your employees to be as productive and the inclusivity of being part of that organization. So with that, what I'm going to do is now hand over to Jason to kick off the presentation. Jason, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, well, I think it's rightly over to me, Al, in the first one, but I'm sure Jason's a little bit relieved on that front. Yeah, so hybrid working's kind of come about post-pandemic. I think before the pandemic happened, I think businesses were all kind of a little bit remote working, but more office-based. Post-pandemic, we're starting to see businesses are starting to go back to the office, but there's a requirement from employees saying, I've really enjoyed working from home. So businesses are looking at what we call hybrid working. A recent study from the BBC has shown that 79% of business leaders and 70% of the general public said that there will be return to the office, but probably not at the same rate as they were before the pandemic. And obviously that's going to bring challenges to businesses, especially with telecommunications and collaboration, be that internally or externally with customers. People need to be able to work the same, whether they're at home, on the move, or in the office. And again, it's about that simple means to communicate both internally and externally with customers whilst maintaining productivity, as well as, from our perspective, is always being secure and compliant. So with the landscape changing, again, that insecurity of employees not having that possibly that same visibility they would have if they were in the office, they've got to have that visibility, whether that, again, home, office or remote working. So, 69% of senior business leaders are saying that, and 62% of the general public surveyed feel that because they're going to be home working more, they may struggle with that. So whatever we can do to help alleviate that and make them feel a little bit more secure, then that's great. So leading into the first one, Jason, what kind of problems do we start and see with this hybrid working?
It's a really good question. Yeah, all of those things are quite challenging. I think straight off, having people working remotely and having people working in the office, the biggest challenge is how do you maintain that consistent and good employee experience? You want to make sure that everybody's on an equal path, whether they are in the office or whether remotely, so they have the same capabilities. The obvious one is I'm used to an infrastructure where I'm working in the office. I've got a great network. I've got an infrastructure built for all of that. When working from home, you've got an internet connection and broadband. You may not have that same capability. So that is, again, a really difficult one and one that you need to have a look at. The third one, I think, is in the past, we've all been at some point in time working from a mobile phone. And with a mobile phone comes challenges in terms of coverage. As we'll see later on, one of the things is that mobiles are often bought by companies based on the company strategy rather than where the employee is actually based and whether they actually have coverage. We're seeing a big shift into things like bring your own device. So that's sort of equalising that landscape a bit, but that again is certainly a challenge. As companies have evolved and moved into Teams, we're seeing a lot of people who are utilising Teams for internal communications, but haven't made that jump to external communications. So predominantly they're either utilising a third-party system, a mobile or a soft client. And part of those challenges are that sometimes they either have disparate features or perhaps no features at home that they do in the office, which effectively limits their ability to do their job. So I'm talking about things like recording whilst you're working from home, or even PCI if you're doing credit card payments as an example. Now, all that taken into consideration is quite difficult when you're managing your existing employees, but that is then hugely amplified when you're dealing with people who are coming into the business or are being onboarded by an employer. So again, that's another difficult thing that people are really need to overcome and understand how they can overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I think as well, Jason, what we're seeing, obviously, there's a number of projects that we've both been working on quite recently around looking at network optimization. So where a lot of our customers have had issues with internal network connectivity with people going back to the office and having a bad experience, a bad user experience, and then we're having to go in, retrofit all of that and design that network back in so it's fit for purpose. It's really essential that organizations do the due diligence on things like network health checks and posture assessments and making sure that things like quality of services and prioritization is configured on the LAN and WAN. And obviously we're seeing that shift now to a lot away from traditional sort of MPLS and WANs and LANs to SD-WANs. That and then is where people are starting to look at what do I do about the home office and how do I secure that home office and how do I make sure that everything is as secure as possible, looking at things like Intune and those types of product sets to ensure that's going to be able to happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jason, you've highlighted some great examples there. I mean, obviously, hybrid working does touch upon all those areas, and Al, like you say, those network issues that face people day to day being remote. Teams had a huge boost through COVID. I think we're looking at 250 million monthly users now, which is quite significant. Majority of those, as Jason says, it is predominantly internal communication still. They are still relying on that third piece. But I think that's kind of where Teams Voice kicked in to start and leverage the same application to do your customer calls as well. So what we'll do is we'll quickly jump into it. And for those who may or may not be aware, I think it's just key to kind of start off with what is Microsoft Teams Voice?
Yeah, well, very simply put, Microsoft Teams Voice is Microsoft's cloud-based phone system, which is in the cloud and accessible from all of the devices that Teams provides, whether that be your desktop, whether that be your mobile or a desk phone. So the full part of it is to deliver a service which enables rich audio and video collaboration, irrespective of where you are and irrespective of which part of Teams you're actually utilizing at the time. So there are lots and lots of devices, as I mentioned. The other thing to consider is they're bringing out more and more Teams certified handsets now, and those handsets come with a lot more technology built in to enhance and enforce that Teams hybrid working philosophy, as well as just when you're using the desktop and the client. So what do you need to enable this functionality? Well, very simply put, you just require a phone system license, which, depending on your existing Microsoft licenses, is either inclusive or very simply it's just added on to whatever your license structure is. And that's something that obviously Bytes can help and support around when indeed you do see a move to Teams being something that you either want to do or need to do in the future. And once that phone system part is in place, then very simply it's your choice between calling plans or direct routing for the PSTN connectivity.
Yeah, I know we say about communication with customers. Yes, you can have video calls, etc., through Teams meetings and the like. But that PSTN connectivity and calling is kind of where Teams Voice is coming in. And you mentioned 2 options there. We've got calling plans and direct routing. Calling plans is the first and simple option. It's a first step for many businesses to look at a better communication in that hybrid working. It is an all-encompassing cloud-based solution where Microsoft becomes your PSTN carrier. So it's fully hosted by Microsoft, which is great. It's quick and simple to set up, and you get some really good telephony requirements off the back of it. Basically, what you're doing there is you're saying, be my provider, give me a bundle of minutes, and away you go. So by switching to calling plans, it is simple. We'll maybe touch upon porting in a little bit, but it's the first step if you want to do and start to reduce your internal footprint of PBXs and telephony systems from that side. Downsides though, with those minute bundles, it can be quite expensive, but again, it depends on the scenario you want to go for. And you also mentioned direct routing.
Yeah, that's right. So to go into that, calling plans is based around associating a bundle of minutes to an individual user, both at a domestic level and an international level. And because you've got that committed minute on a user basis, it's not always the most cost effective. So direct routing is the alternative, which allows you to connect up to Teams with a different approach from a telephony provider and almost a choose your own carrier perspective. So that means that you can take advantage of cheaper call rates and more flexibility. It enables you to have a relationship with the carrier of choice to then implement an end-to-end fully managed service option, something that you're not going to get within the calling plans system right now. So businesses actually really see direct routing as extremely attractive because it gives them that true flexibility of choosing what they want in place and what telephone provider they actually want to use. And because it's still a certified capability through the Microsoft program, then it's still basically a verified integration with your Microsoft Teams platform. So as I mentioned, the biggest piece is that direct routing will always mean you'll get a cheaper recurring price per user per month, simply because you're not allocating minutes at an individual level. You're effectively creating a pool of those minutes in many instances. So you can take advantage of those cheaper call rates. You can get cheaper user licenses and that minute bundle flexibility in many instances.
Just for people out there as well. So obviously we'll be seeing a move away from ISDN in a few years' time, and obviously everything's moving to SIP. So for those of you who might have ISDN 30s, or you might have SIP channels out there, and you're paying for that, per channel, and then you're paying over the top for the minutes. Direct routing and the way that providers are doing it now, all of that goes away. So you would just basically buy a minute bundle, and that replaces everything. So again, helping reduce cost. It's a lot easier to deal with. It's super scalable as well, so you don't have to worry about concurrency and things like that. It scales up and down to your needs.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, the amount of times we see people saying, well, how much capacity can I have, and will it deliver me this amount of number of concurrent calls? All of that just goes away with this service. All of that is done at much like at the carrier level. But stepping aside from that, one of the other things that it does is it gives you more flexibility and with regard to integration. The way it works is you can create SIP connections into existing PBXs or third-party services. And that's really helpful from both a migration point of view, which simplifies that approach and can often reduce the technicalities and the difficulties of transitioning hundreds, if not thousands, of users over. But fundamentally, it gives you the ability to integrate into services that Teams may not offer right at that time. So if you want to move into Teams, very often we see projects where they're literally just looking at Teams and Teams telephony, and they'll deal with things like contact center separately. And this is an ideal scenario where you just can chiefly look at the telephony pieces with the fact that you can SIP integrate to a service, so you can maintain that until it's right for you to move over, and that you feel comfortable with all those facilities and features that you use being in place.
Yeah, and it's one of the important things about that approach is that it allows for you to do the end user training and adoption and make sure that is done correctly, because the amount of times it's not done correctly, people don't do persona mapping, people don't get the best experience. You're just increasing the amount of support calls that's going to hit your service desk.
Yeah.
So getting the end user training and adoption using this methodology and approach is absolutely spot on, and what we see a lot of organisations doing when they're deploying teams and voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I suppose the last point on that is that although we've said that about all these, the beauty for customers is that they actually have both options as a customer, so you can leverage the benefits of both solutions. So going back to what Paul mentioned in terms of calling plans, it does have a place, and the prime example of that is, let's say you have a business with a large, complex UK presence, where you need that flexibility that direct routing certainly fits, but you may well have small satellite offices overseas, for example, and it may make more sense to use calling plans for those small satellite offices where the infrastructure isn't there to support something like direct routing. So the great point of that is that customers have the benefit of both of those solutions where they need them, and that makes perfect sense in that regard.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, both options, they've got the place. You can run a hybrid, and again, it's that flexibility which is helping enable hybrid working for all the businesses out there at the moment. Obviously, some of the fears we may touch upon, Al, Jason, when we're kind of going through customer experiences at the moment. I think some of the things we're hearing at the moment is maybe the features aren't there. Is that? I know it's not the case because there's a lot of features available. But is there anything you want to talk about around how we can alleviate that, or I suppose dispel the myth of?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're gonna touch on a few elements further on in the presentation, but I think there is a big misconception, and that primarily I see comes from traditional sort of voice partners, in terms of just trying to displace or discredit Microsoft telephony and saying it's just, you can't replace your PBX because your PBX has got 1,000 bells and whistles on it that most people don't use anyway. But Microsoft, what Microsoft have done really well, and I saw this back in the OCS days when they were working with Nortel, was just take the 20% of functionality everybody uses and just put that within the configuration. So, and as we can see here, there is so much feature functionality that meets, I would probably say in the 420 odd deployments I've been involved in over the last 10 years, meets most people's needs. So
yeah. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, the Microsoft has significantly upgraded Teams to work not just as that communication and collaboration platform, but also from it's introduced a great many different telephony features to it. And obviously, it's got very tight integration with 365. So not only does it fulfill most of the features that people want today, but it actually adds functionality that ordinarily you wouldn't get those features with your legacy or standard PBXs. A good example of that is the transcription piece, where you can transcribe your meetings. So going back to your point, Paul, around the inclusivity and making sure that people get access to this content. Not being able to attend a meeting doesn't mean that you then are not able to access that content. You can see a recording, you can get it transcribed, you've got instant access securely to that. So if you come off on that day of leave thinking, oh no, what have I missed? All that stuff is there. And another great example is things like the presence-based routing, where it's leveraging the underlying presence capabilities of Teams and making decisions on where to place calls to users based on their presence, not on ringing 15 desk phones because they're logged in, but they're actually not even there. So there's a lot of great features that have been introduced into it. And just as you say, Al, in the experience that we've seen, I honestly can say that things like the misinterpretation of some features when they say, oh, you need a call, I need a contact center, but actually auto attend and call queue satisfy most of the features of what people are looking for. In reality, their definition of things like that really just turns out to be an enhanced queue capability. And they don't need workforce optimization or all those other things that come with a very high-end contact center. So, and the beauty about things like auto attend and call queues is that they're delivered through very simple wizard-driven configurations. And we see probably about 80% of people, those functionalities deliver exactly what they want. But even when it doesn't, there are many other providers that can add that functionality to remove any of those technology gaps. And we'll have a look at a little bit later about some of those things around the contact center and the call recording, for example. One thing I just wanted to mention, that on top of all the functionality, and it is quite significant, is that there's a secure and centralized admin portal to manage everything.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important, because you've got something you can access anywhere. You've got something that gives you capabilities to manage your ring groups, your pickup groups, your policies, your user accounts, your dial plans, and all of those sorts of things. Really, really easy to access. But on top of that, you also get things like your call analytics and your call quality dashboards. So irrespective of where you are as a support person, not only can you fulfill the changes and things wherever you're working, but you can actually look at that. You can understand and resolve tickets, resolve issues, even when you're at home, to the same degree as you would be when you're in the office. And that's really key to it. And if you are already using Teams, then you'll already be using the admin portal. So really, Teams is just an extension of the same admin features you're probably used to within Teams. So it's just another different tool on top of that. Really, I think it has been argued in the past, and probably even still today, that the system can't replace everybody's phone system, particularly for really complex infrastructures where they've got lots and lots of features and functionality. But the programs that Microsoft have put in today around recording, around contact centers, around reception consoles, and all of those things, they're removing more and more of those barriers that people are perceiving to be in place before they can move over to Teams.
Yeah.
And that's always going to evolve, isn't it? Because let's face it, how much money do Microsoft spend on their continual investments in the platforms? Those things are going to appear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it's billions, so it's a continuation of development. But I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing now is obviously looking at things like the Power Platform. I mean, even at Bytes, there's, sales management wants certain reports, and they want certain reports that can show how long somebody's been on the phone, who they're on the phone to, how many meetings they've done, Teams meetings they've done, how many IMs and emails and everything else they've sent. And what you're able to do with something like Power BI is pull that into a nice visual dashboard to be able to provide those real good insights. And obviously, data is at the forefront of everybody's mind at the moment in terms of that's your IP. And what you do with that data, and the better experience and the better reporting you can give to management, the more effective the business comes, the more effective and more productive the employee becomes. So, Power BI, coupled with Teams and all the reporting that you can do from the various different data dips is one of those things which probably is underplayed a lot, I think,
Yeah.
And I think, if anybody out there, you want to take a bit of a deeper look about what can be done using things like Power BI, then obviously Teleware have a lot of experience around that as well. So,
like you say, it's all the valid points you've raised there is that, again, that security piece of it. By moving away into Teams Voice, you can simplify your security footprint. I mean, trying to think about how I would connect to an old school PBX, I need a VPN, a login account, the list goes on and on. And I think it's that part there when we start to go through, well, I need to start and move away from my system. And what are the key considerations when we start to look at that moving? What do you experience when you're speaking to customers and doing those rollouts? Obviously, for migration for Teleware, we went through it. It was a learning curve, but for me, the best thing was I don't need a mobile phone. I don't need a desk phone anymore. I've just got a headset and my own mobile phone now. So what's the key considerations you think about that we want to help customers with?
So for me, it's just spending time and going through the process of that persona mapping piece, understanding your use cases, understanding what your principal users do. And once you understand that and how they interoperate with the different parts of the businesses, you then get a more open view in terms of what their requirements are and how those requirements align to the roles that they perform within the business. And that's so key, because if you roll these things out and you don't understand that, then you're just going to give everybody that carte blanche. Here's a phone, here's this, off you go. And that's never going to work. And it goes alongside what you said, Alan, again, on that usage and adoption piece. So understanding that helps you understand what your requirements are down to that level. And then you can make a decision about whether it's calling plans, direct routing, or hybrid solution past that.
Yeah, and I think the really important piece around this is you need to follow Microsoft best practices when it comes to deciding what the design is going to look like.
Yeah.
You know, I will always strongly recommend that anybody, any organisation out there, works with a Microsoft certified architect, because these are the guys who do this day in, day out. You know, they'll do everything from the initial discovery phase, understanding what you've got where, right down to things like analog. You've got door entry systems, you've got red car alarms, you've got lifts, faxes. All of those things need taken into consideration. You know, designing in, make sure it's all covered. And again, go back to the network piece. Do your due diligence around the network piece. You know, Microsoft's got its own tools out there, but again, you know, there's other partners out there like IR Prognosis, who can give you some amazing insights into what's going on onto your network, and also stress test the network. So looking at real life simulation testing, you know, and what it's going to look like, you know, using things like concurrency ratios, and then looking at modalities and pushing that out, and it'll give you a real view of what's going on, what that might need to be tweaked before you do, you know, a full blown production pilot.
Yeah, and I think when you obviously through that migration piece, you do all that front end, you know, research, but then obviously you've got to get into the grips of it and let's start rolling this out. You know, it's key, as you say, to get users adopted. Let's not try and adopt everyone into it. So is it a big bang approach, or, you know, we can do it in a phased approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's, you know, I mean, it's fine if you're greenfield, you've got a new site to spin up.
Yeah.
You know, just do that, use calling plans, use direct routing, and that's quite easy. It's when you've got to go through that end user training and adoption and give that time, because if you start to think about, you know, your DDI ranges and how they're associated to users in different offices, you need to break all that down first of all, and that will then sort of form your migration strategy. And that can take anywhere. I mean, we've seen projects take from 6 months to 6 years, you know, and they're just ongoing projects, but all of that's got to be taken into consideration, mapped through, and make sure that, you know, that it's all kind of formalized in a good project plan, and obviously taking into account things like change management, and obviously the end user training and adoption, that continued sort of blended learning approach. So, you know, bits of, you know, instructor led, and then e-learning as well.
Yeah, all great points. I suppose the other thing on top of that is things like the porting. Porting is always one of those things that's seen as a bit of a dark art, and nobody quite understands how it works, but it just does. But on a real serious note, porting it can be complex and it can be a lengthy process. You've always got to factor that in, but it is regulated, and there are very simple steps to follow through. I think the key is having a good relationship with your carriers and with the providers to learn how those processes are at work, and not to throw a piece of paper in there, forget about it, because there are very, very stringent things that you need to complete with that. And it's not difficult, it just has to be managed in an appropriate way. Likewise, devices, again, Al, going back to that persona mapping, devices, there's lots and lots of different things available. Your provider of choice will always give you that support, and will give you the list of the devices that properly map back to those particular roles, whether that be common area phones or basic requirements, all the way up to your senior exec devices that you could typically use. I mean, one point for me, and I'm sure you guys will agree with this, the mobile clients is brilliant. I mean, it's one of the best parts of that, and Hannah's probably been responsible for businesses approaching things like this in a very different way, and not taking that visibility of that view of, right, I've got 50 handsets, I need to replace them with 50 handsets. That's all gone away now with this. And it comes back to your point earlier on about that hybrid working piece. You can use those clients, you can use those mobile clients, and they're so easy. They can be implemented utilizing Endpoint Manager as was Intune. They can be controlled whether you have a corporate, whether you have a bring your own device, very, very simply. And I love the feature whereby you can be out in the car, you can walk into the car being on the client on the mobile, you can walk into your home office, you can put on your desktop client. It will tell you in a call, do you want to switch? Yes, and be straight into that call.
Yeah, like you said, it's a great feature. In fact, we did do a tech tip on that the other week. I think it's, as you say, there's a lot to consider, but Teams Voice has that flexibility to help you, to support you, no matter what stage you're at within that hybrid working.
Yeah.
And you've touched upon, I know we've got a point there around integration to existing services, which kind of brings us back to something you raised earlier, which is contact centers.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of contact centers out there. A lot of businesses running contact centers. A recent survey from the Call Center Management Association shows that 79% of contact center advisors are now looking for hybrid working. You know, that's a big shift in the number of employees of bums on seat in an office. And I'm sure those businesses are going, can I shift to Teams voice? Does it allow me to do what I want it to do? I've got this. Can I integrate it? You know, what options as a contact center manager or business do we have with Teams voice?
So I was going to say there are lots.
Huge subject, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, we could literally just spend 40 minutes just talking around contact centers.
Yeah. From my, I was
my
going to say, from my perspective, you go back to something you mentioned earlier on. It's that perspective of what is a contact center. The first one for me is actually look at the auto attend and call queue functionality. It's got a lot in it. Your requirements in terms of contact centers may not be something that is as excessive to Teams. You might be able to get the functionality straight away from the native functionality. So that's the first one. Do your mapping over that and see what you actually do use. The second point is if you have a contact center, direct routing will enable you to drive the Teams migration, but at the same time connect into your existing contact center. We see a lot of RFPs where you're actually separating the Teams migration from the contact center functionality, and to simplify the approach, get them into Teams, connect in those contact center pieces, and then you can move on to what I kind of see as the third phase, which is your panacea, where you're effectively leveraging a native Teams contact center, which lots of those now are becoming more available in the Microsoft Cloud Center as a service type programs, where there are lots of functionality and services that can be delivered today. The ultimate goal is, of course, one app, one screen, all in Teams, so that it provides that consistent hybrid working experience.
Yeah, like you said, there's three options there, from the simple to the most advanced. Again, it's just that flexibility that we're seeing with Teams Voice that's, you know, allowing businesses to pick what they want relevant to where they are. Anything you've got to add to that, Al? Or?
I mean, I'd strongly advise that kind of, you know, if you're looking at contact centers, work with a Microsoft certified contact center provider. And there's so many great features around what they're doing from an AI perspective that can make that customer experience, that customer journey far, far richer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, and I think with all of these types of communications and with every business thinking about shifting away from the legacy, which has been in place for umpteen years, they're comfortable with it. You know, security and compliance in our day and age with technology, access to information, it's key. With telephony, it's just the same. It's data at the end of the day. So moving into Teams Voice, you know, how does it help me reduce my security footprint within the business?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the first thing to say is, Microsoft Teams is built on a very secure environment, and Teams forms part of that. It's got lots of security features such as your single sign-on, your Windows Hello, your multi-factor authentication, conditional access, all those things that help you secure your environment, and Teams falls into that. It allows you to embed your telephony solution into that environment, so the voice parts can benefit from all of those security pieces and remove all of those potential things that you're having to manage on premise that cost you money and have complexity around managing each and individual component of those parts. So I'm thinking things like DLP, antivirus and the likes. You can consolidate all that up into the Microsoft Cloud and take advantage of that. The key thing is it's helping you to simplify your account management and your system administration as a result.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, I mean, it's also, it protects against you getting hacked. So, give you an example, I was on the phone to a customer the other day who had basically had a very insecure VPN connection from their service provider that got hacked, and somebody been making premium rate numbered calls over the weekend and racked up an 80 grand bill, you know, and there's nothing they can do about it. And all that goes away. Those problems go away because, to your point, Jason, you know, Microsoft is one of the most secure cloud-based service providers out there in the world today. They invest $1 billion every year into security, and they are, you know, an exceptionally talented team of people who do all the stress testing, pen testing, vulnerability, and are effectively just trying to hack their own network all the time. So
yeah, and like you said, people are familiar with that with Microsoft itself, with SharePoint and Azure. But when it comes to that telephony, maybe it's just that underlying, are we still okay? Like you say, it's we certainly are secure in that way. And I think with Teams, that compliance piece as well, you know, with legacy PBXs that have got PCI and all the rest of it. And with Teams, we do get that flexibility because you've got the same client, be it desktop, mobile, web, and you are using that client to make your PSTN calls. You're simplifying that compliance piece, because I'm not, as an employee, I'm not given the option to have to fail over to something which might not be compliant.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You use your Teams client wherever you need to. So and if it comes down to things like, oh, my internet's not there, then tether your mobile. It still provides you with perfect connectivity into the Microsoft Teams space, so you can ensure that you can make calls via the Teams clients, and it can be recorded. And that's the key to it all. Other benefits, of course, within the compliance stuff is that recording within Teams can record calls, video-based desktop sharing. It can do all those, and you can enforce recording as a policy against any individual within Teams. Yeah. So that includes peer-to-peer, all your PSTN calls, even calls delivered to you via meetings, inbound calls via auto-attending call queues. They're all covered under that. And unlike native Teams recording, it's forced. You can't bypass it, which is absolutely the key. And make sure that all of that is fulfilled inside that compliance meet, so that you have policies that can manage your retention, deletion, where they're stored, what part of Azure, and that they're encrypted at rest, which is absolutely hard to. It's the focal point on ensuring compliance.
Yeah, and again, it's not another system to manage and maintain, is it? It's within Teams. It's all regulated. You've got that one window, that one console to be able to administer and manage things moving forward.
Yeah.
So I think obviously Teams Voice, we've spoke about it quite significantly over the last half an hour or so, and it certainly does enable hybrid working. Just from the examples we've given of that consistent experience, it's no matter where you are, no matter what device you've got, it's so much easier, like you say, for myself, just to pick my mobile phone and have a customer call through my Teams, as opposed to trying to think, how do I contact? So from a consistent experience, I think it's great. You've also, because it's in there, you've got that immersive experience with regards to Teams and transcriptions, events, etc.
Yeah.
And as you said, Al and Jason, that flexibility from all those scenarios, it certainly helped ourselves in Teleware, but I mean, you've got some great examples of customers where that flexibility has really helped them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key for me is it does support that hybrid working environment. That it allows them to work from anywhere. It's got a multitude of collaboration capabilities, and most of the native features that come out of Teams will satisfy the vast majority of people today. So yeah, and there's lots of other Microsoft programs coming along to add features that will just keep going on and on and on through this. So yeah. Totally.
I mean, you know, in terms of the features as well, it's like the higher definition noise cancelling elements of it as well. So it blocks out all your background noise. It's brilliant, you know. And obviously you've got blurred screen and everything else. So you can be effectively sat on a beach in Greece. People think you're in the office. So.
Yeah, and I think as you've said once or twice through the presentation, Al, is that it's Microsoft who are putting the money behind this. They're the ones developing it. They're the ones that are pushing it. And we know with everything that's Microsoft based over the last 5 to 10 years, if not back in the 80s, is they're all about that future. They want to be around, they want to be relevant. So it makes sense that moving through to Teams Voice, it just helps business settle for that future as well, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Guys, just conscious of time, we've got quite a lot to get through and not a lot of time left.
So I think we're done now. I think we're going to hand over back to you, Al.
Oh, yeah, fantastic. Well, that's great timing then. I was just looking at the slides there. So yeah, I mean, one thing I did want to touch on just in sort of the closing elements is, you know, if you go out there and you talk to people like Gartner, if you talk to people like Gamma and Verizon, 8x8, you know, especially from a Gartner standpoint, and it slightly irritates me because it's completely not right. But they're advising that you need to work with another telephony provider, i.e., add another telephone system over the top of Microsoft Teams. Like we said, you know, 99% of the time, Teams natively will just do everything that you want it to. So what I would say is, look, you know, do your due diligence, work with people like Teleware 365, work with subject matter experts. I'm here, you know, to talk to you know, have workshops with, as an impartial consultant for Bytes, and obviously Bytes customers more importantly, just to help you navigate around, you know, the various different partners that are out there. You know, what people may or may not be saying in terms of feature functionality, but you know, we've got a lot of sort of workshops out there. There's Microsoft funded workshops. Bytes are also funding certain types of workshops as well. We've got proof of concepts that Teleware will run for, you know, 60 days for up to 25 users, you know, that will give you a real life example of, you know, how it does replace your telephone system in the real world, you know, and what that's going to look like. But thank you very much, both, for your time today. It's been really great, and obviously we could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours around this subject.
Good.
But yeah, appreciate you joining, and thank you everyone for watching this. I hope you're enjoying the summit, and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.